Commander Valkthor swirled his luminescent drink, watching the purple liquid cast dancing shadows across the polished obsidian bar top of the warrior's rest. His four arms, the top pair adorned with campaign medals, the bottom pair bearing fresh burn scars, moved in perfect coordination as he adjusted his position on the hoverstool. The movement made his ceremonial armor clink softly against the bar's edge, drawing curious glances from the gaggle of wide-eyed cadets trying and failing to be subtle about watching him. "By the seven moons, just come over here already," Valkthor called out, his voice carrying the gravelly undertone typical of veteran Zentari warriors. "Your attempt at stealth would make a human laugh. And trust me, that's not something you want to experience firsthand." The cadets practically tripped over each other in their rush to surround him. Their scaled faces flushed various shades of green with excitement and embarrassment. Valkthor counted 8 of them, fresh from the academy, judging by their pristine uniforms and unmarked honor plates. "Commander, is it true?" The boldest of the bunch, a female cadet with striking silver scales, leaned forward. "Did you really fight alongside the humans in the Battle of Station 9? Valkthor barked out a laugh that made several nearby patrons jump. "Alongside them? Child, I fought against them first. That's how I learned to respect them and fear them." He drained his glass, gesturing to the bartender, a burly Craxian with too many eyes, for another round. "But Commander," another cadet chimed in, this one barely old enough to have completed basic training. "The briefings say humans are Class 3 warriors at best. Fragile endoskeleton, no natural armor, limited sensory capacity." "Oh, those briefings." Valkthor slapped all 4 hands on the bar, making the glasses dance. "Written by academics who've never seen a human eat spicy food for fun or, even more terrifying, drink something called espresso before battle." He shuddered dramatically, earning nervous laughs from his audience. The silver-scaled cadet whose name tag read Nixara pulled up a stool. "Please, Commander, tell us what they're really like. The official reports feel sanitized." "Sanitized?" Valkthor snorted, accepting his fresh drink. "That's like saying a quantum torpedo is just a fancy firework. Listen closely, younglings, because what I'm about to tell you might save your lives someday. Or at least save you from the embarrassment of underestimating a species that treats sleep deprivation like a casual hobby." He leaned back, his scarred armor catching the bar's ambient lighting. The cadets unconsciously leaned forward, their antennae twitching with anticipation. Even the bartender slowed his cleaning routine, 1 or 2 of his eyes always focused on the commander. "It was 3 cycles ago, right before the Great Alliance. I was leading the 47th Zentari battle fleet. Yes, the same one you study in your tactical courses. We thought we were the most fearsome fighting force in the quadrant." He paused, mandibles clicking in amusement. "We were wrong. So gloriously, hilariously wrong." "But you were decorated for valor in that campaign," Nixara pointed out, gesturing to his medals. "Oh yes, I earned these. Earned them by surviving long enough to learn that everything we thought we knew about warfare was about to change. You see, we Zentari pride ourselves on our logical approach to battle, our disciplined formations, our carefully planned strategies." He gestured to the cadets' own perfectly aligned uniform insignias. "And then we met a species that turned chaos into an art form." The youngest cadet raised a trembling hand. Is it true they can continue fighting with broken limbs?" Valkthor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep amusement. "Broken limbs? Child, I once saw a human engineer repair a fusion core with a broken arm, 2 cracked ribs, and what they called a hangover, which, by the way, is a form of voluntary poison recovery that they routinely inflict upon themselves. For fun." The bar had grown quieter, other patrons drifting closer to listen. Valkthor noticed but pretended not to, a skill perfected over many cycles of telling war stories. "But that's not even the most terrifying part," he continued, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "The most terrifying part is their capacity for what they call humor in battle. You haven't known true fear until you've heard human laughter echoing through your ship's corridors during a boarding action." He paused, letting that image sink in. The cadets exchanged nervous glances, their scales rippling with a mix of fear and fascination. Nyxara's antennae were practically vibrating with curiosity. "Commander," she ventured, "are you saying we should fear humans? Fear them?" Valkthor considered the question, all four eyes focusing on his swirling drink. "No. Respect them? Absolutely. Fear what they're capable of when pushed? Without question. But most importantly," he grinned, showing his ceremonial battle fangs, "you should fear what they'll teach you about yourself when you fight alongside them." Our first encounter with humans? Valkthor straightened his posture, all four arms moving to rest on the bar. "That was the day we learned that every tactical manual in our fleet wasn't worth the quantum paper it was printed on." The silver-scaled Nyxara leaned forward, her glass forgotten. "Was it during the Orion Sector campaign?" "Precisely. We had a fleet of 30 ships, top-of-the-line Zentari dreadnoughts, each one capable of reducing a small moon to cosmic dust. We were tracking what we thought was a lost merchant vessel near the Rigel Drift. Instead, we found the USS Defiant." "Captain Alexandra Drake's ship?" one of the cadets gasped. "The ghost of Orion herself?" "The very same." Valkthor nodded, his mandibles clicking with remembered tension. "Though we didn't know her reputation then. All we saw was a single human vessel, less than half the size of our smallest ship. I remember thinking it would be a simple capture mission." He laughed, the sound carrying equal parts admiration and embarrassment. "I ordered 2 of our ships to flank them while I transmitted standard surrender protocols. The response we got? Music. Loud, thundering music that they somehow patched through our communication systems, something they called rock and roll." The bartender, who had been pretending not to listen, couldn't help but interject. "They played music during a battle." "Not just any music," Valkthor said, shaking his head. "Later I learned it was a song called Welcome to the Jungle. Captain Drake had quite the sense of humor." His expression grew more animated as he continued. "Before we could even process this bizarre psychological tactic, the Defiant did something no sane military commander would ever consider. They flew straight at us, not at our flanking ships, mind you, right at our command vessel." "But that's suicide," Nyxara protested. "Their shields would have been shredded by our combined fire." "That's exactly what our tactical officer said, right up until the moment their ship started dancing." "Dancing?" The cadets exchanged confused looks. "There's no better word for it. Captain Drake had modified their inertial dampeners to allow maneuvers that should have turned their crew into organic paste. They spun, rolled, and twisted through space like a drunk Silverian swoop bird, all while that music kept blasting through our comms. Every time we thought we had a target lock, they'd be somewhere else." Valkthor's upper hands traced the erratic flight pattern in the air. "Our gunners were trained to track logical flight paths, to anticipate standard evasive maneuvers. But humans? They turned space combat into a dance party." "But surely our superior numbers," one cadet began. "Led to our own ships shooting each other," Valkthor interrupted with a grimace. "In the chaos of trying to hit the Defiant, 3 of our vessels managed to score direct hits on our own ships. And Captain Drake? She was laughing, actually laughing on an open channel." He paused to take a drink, his 4 eyes briefly unfocusing as he recalled the memory. Then came the real surprise. While we were distracted by their acrobatics, they'd launched what looked like debris from their cargo holds. Our sensors dismissed them as battle damage. Turned out each piece was a micro-drone carrying a high-yield EMP device. By the time we realized what was happening, half our fleet had lost primary power. The other half was too busy trying to avoid collision with their disabled companions. And there was Alexandra Drake, finally opening a proper communication channel, looking like she'd just enjoyed a pleasant afternoon stroll. "You know what she said?" Valkthor leaned forward, lowering his voice dramatically. "She said, 'That was fun. Now, should we discuss the terms of your surrender, or would you like to dance another song?'" The cadets burst into nervous laughter, their scales shifting colors with mixed emotions. "But the most remarkable thing?" Valkthor continued. "Not a single ship was destroyed, not one life lost. She had completely neutralized a superior force without causing a single casualty. When I met her years later, I asked why. She said, "Dead enemies can't become friends, and you looked like you'd be interesting friends." She was right, of course. That battle taught us more about humans than 1,000 intelligence reports. They're unpredictable, yes, sometimes terrifying, absolutely, but they also show mercy when they don't have to, find humor in the darkest moments, and turn their weaknesses into strengths. Nixiara's antenna twitched thoughtfully. Is that why the tactical manuals were updated to include sections on human music and cultural references? Yes, though I doubt it helps much. Humans are constantly creating new music, new references, new ways to be unpredictable. The day you think you understand them is the day they'll surprise you again. "What happened to Captain Drake?" the youngest cadet asked. Valkthor's mandibles spread in what passed for a Zentari smile. "Oh, she's still out there, teaching at their Space Warfare Academy. She uses the footage from our battle as a training video, calls it How to Make Friends and Influence Aliens. Last I heard, she had an entire course dedicated to incorporating 20th century Earth music into battle strategies." He straightened his ceremonial armor, the metals catching the light. "But that was just our first encounter with humans. Wait until you hear about the ground battles. That's when we learned that their apparent physical limitations were actually their greatest strengths." Valk quote. Thor, quote, ES upper right hand traced the scar running down his ceremonial armor. Space battles were one thing, but ground combat? That's where we truly learned what humans were capable of. He gestured to the bartender for another round. The Battle of New Eden changed everything we thought we knew about human physiology. Our scientists had classified them as endurance predators, but reading data and experiencing it firsthand are very different things. "Tell us about Sergeant Rodriguez," one of the cadets burst out, earning sharp looks from his companions. Valkthor's mandibles twitched in amusement. "Ah, Marcus Rodriguez, the Nightmare of New Eden, as our troops called him, though he hated that title, said it was too dramatic." Valkthor accepted his fresh drink. "But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me set the scene properly." New Eden was supposed to be an easy victory. A small human colony, minimal defenses, harsh environment. The planet's atmosphere was thick with volcanic ash. Surface temperatures fluctuated between freezing and boiling, and acid rain was a daily occurrence. Our environmental suits were top of the line, good for 72 hours of continuous operation. He paused, letting out a wheezing laugh. The humans? They had basic rebreathers and temperature regulation vests. Not even full suits. We thought they were mad, or desperate. Turns out they were just being human. Our dropships landed during a Category 3 ash storm. Perfect cover, or so we thought. That's when we met Rodriguez and his unit of Colonial Marines. They had spent 6 months adapting to New Eden's environment, training in the ash storms, learning to use the planet's hostility to their advantage. Nixiara's scales rippled with interest. But our intelligence suggested human troops needed regular rest cycles and constant resupply. Ha! Valkthor slapped the bar with his lower hands. Regular rest cycles? Rodriguez and his troops stayed awake for 5 straight days during the battle. They called it being hyped up on something called energy drinks and pure stubbornness. 5 days without sleep? The youngest cadet's antenna drooped in disbelief. 5 days, and not just awake, fighting. You see, we had superior numbers, superior equipment, and superior position. But they had something we couldn't counter: adaptation. Rodriguez had trained his troops to fight in zero visibility conditions by developing what they called ash sense. The commander gestured to his 4 eyes. We rely heavily on our enhanced vision. They knew this, so they used the ash storms to blind our sensors, then navigated by touch and sound alone. Do you know how unsettling it is to hear human laughter echoing through an ash storm? But the most incredible part was their endurance. We planned for a quick victory, thinking the environment would force the humans to surrender once their limited supplies ran out. Instead, they turned the planet itself into a weapon. They used the acid rain to erode our equipment, the temperature swings to create false sensor readings, and the volcanic vents to mask their movements. Rodriguez himself once appeared out of a sulfur vent that our sensors said was hot enough to cook a Craxian alive. One of the cadets raised a trembling hand. Is it true he carried a wounded squad mate for 2 days through the ash wastes? 3 days, Valkthor corrected. Through ash storms, acid rain, and volcanic eruptions. When we finally cornered them, Rodriguez was singing something called Sweet Home Alabama, while providing covering fire with one arm and carrying his unconscious comrade with the other. But how? Nyxara demanded. Their endoskeleton structure shouldn't allow for such prolonged physical stress. That's the thing about humans. Valkthor leaned forward conspiratorially. Their bodies tell them something is impossible, and they take it as a personal challenge. Rodriguez later told me they have a saying, pain is just weakness leaving the body. Completely insane, of course, but that's humans for you. The breaking point came when they started using our own tactical doctrines against us. Every time we adapted to one of their guerrilla strategies, they'd switch to something completely different. Rodriguez called it mixing it up to keep it spicy, another human phrase I never quite understood. On the final day of battle, we had them surrounded at their main compound. Our remaining forces were exhausted, our suits were failing, and morale was low. Then Rodriguez's voice came over our comm systems, asking if we'd like to come in for something called coffee and negotiate a ceasefire. Valkthor shook his head in remembered amazement. We thought it was a trap. It wasn't. They had actually taken the time to prepare a stimulant beverage they claimed would help us stay alert during negotiations. Rodriguez met us at the gate, looking like he'd been through a meat grinder but grinning like it was a festival day. Want to know the truly terrifying part? After everything, the sleep deprivation, the wounds, the constant combat, he insisted on giving us a tour of their facility first. Proudly showed us how they'd modified their equipment to work in New Eden's environment, even offered to share their adaptation techniques. When I asked him why he would share military secrets with an enemy, he just shrugged and said, "Better to make friends than corpses. Besides, anyone crazy enough to fight in this hellhole deserves to know how to do it properly." The cadets sat in stunned silence, trying to process this information. Finally, Nyxara spoke up. "Commander, did you ever find out how they maintained their morale through such conditions?" "Oh yes," Valkthor nodded sagely. "They held nightly singing contests in their bunkers. Rodriguez claimed music helped them ignore the pain and exhaustion. Said something about how rock and roll never dies, and neither do Marines. The most successful military operation in our history was nearly derailed by sleep-deprived humans having a karaoke party in a volcanic war zone." He drained his glass and set it down firmly. "That's why our current training includes environmental endurance courses. Not because we can match human endurance, we can't, but because we need to understand what we're dealing with. Though I still maintain that adding their music to combat simulations is psychological warfare against our own troops." Valkthor's tone grew more somber as he gazed into his drink. The bar had grown quieter, the ambient lighting dimming to match the mood shift. But the real turning point of the war wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about sacrifice and understanding. It happened at Station 7. Nyxara's antenna drooped slightly. "The siege of Station 7? We studied that battle, but the official records are incomplete." "Incomplete," Valkthor repeated, his mandibles clicking softly. "That's one way to put it. How do you document something that changes the way an entire species sees another?" He straightened in his seat, his armor catching the low light. Station 7 was our most advanced research facility. When the swarm attacked, we had 3,000 civilian scientists trapped inside. The human fleet arrived first, just 2 ships, but one of them carried Lieutenant Jessica Chen and her team of engineers. "The same Jessica Chen who revolutionized shield harmonics?" one of the cadets asked, antenna twitching with excitement. "The very same, though back then she was just another human engineer who talked too fast and drank concerning amounts of something called Red Bull." Valkthor's upper right hand traced a pattern in the condensation on his glass. "When our forces arrived, we found the humans had already docked with the station. Against all protocols and common sense, they went in without waiting for backup. We thought they were being typically reckless humans. Lieutenant Chen had other ideas. She took one look at the station's schematics and said, and I quote, 'These ventilation shafts are perfect for crawling around like action movie heroes.' When our commander pointed out that the shafts were filled with toxic gas due to battle damage, she just shrugged and said, 'That's what good filters and better timing are for.' Then she started assigning joint teams, one human engineer paired with one Zentari warrior. Valkthor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. It was chaos at first. Our warriors couldn't understand why the humans kept making references to something called Die Hard during combat situations. The humans couldn't understand why we insisted on following proper military protocols while crawling through maintenance tubes. But Chen? She somehow spoke both languages. She'd translate human jokes into Zentari tactical terms, explain our honor codes using references to their entertainment videos. She turned a desperate last stand into something like a training exercise. Then the swarm breached the central hub. We lost contact with 3 sectors. The station's core began to destabilize. Our commanders wanted to retreat, save who we could. Chen had different ideas. The commander paused, accepting another drink from the bartender, who had long since abandoned any pretense of not listening. She figured out that the station's shield matrix could be reconfigured to create a resonance pulse that would disrupt the swarm's hive mind connection. The catch? Someone had to manually rewire the core controls in a chamber flooded with radiation. The human commander forbade her from going. Our commander calculated it was certain death. Chen looked at both of them and said, "With all due respect, sirs, I've already done the math. And I've had enough caffeine to power a small city. I'm doing this." Valkthor's voice grew quieter. She made it sound like a joke, like it was just another crazy human stunt. But when she looked at her team, human and Zentari alike, we all knew. She cleared her throat and said, "It's been an honor serving with you all, even if you guys never learned to appreciate good coffee." The last transmission we got from her was a laughing request to name the next shield advancement after her. Said she always wanted to be immortalized in a technical manual. Then she started singing something called "Don't Stop Believin'" while rewiring the core. It worked. The swarm ships lost coordination. Their drones went dormant. We saved over 2,000 civilians. But more than that, we learned something about humans that day. Something that changed everything. Nixara leaned forward. "What was that, Commander?" "We learned that their jokes, their seemingly random references, their strange habits, it wasn't just chaos or madness. It was their way of facing the impossible, of making the unbearable bearable." Chen knew she was going to die, but she chose to do it while making her team smile one last time. After that day, our joint operations changed. We stopped trying to make humans follow our protocols and started learning to adapt to each other. They taught us to find humor in darkness. We taught them to find order in chaos. Together, we became something neither side expected. We became friends. The technical manual for the Chen-class shield matrix includes a small note at the bottom. It says, "Powered by courage, caffeine, and really good timing." Most engineers think it's a technical reference. Those of us who were there know better. Valkthor raised his glass slightly. Every year on the anniversary of Station 7, human and Zentari engineers gather to drink coffee and sing bad karaoke. They say it's what she would have wanted. They're probably right. That's why human unpredictability is now considered an asset in joint operations, not a liability. Because Lieutenant Jessica Chen taught us that sometimes the craziest solution is the right one. And sometimes the greatest strength isn't in victory, but in how you face inevitable defeat. The commander's mandibles clicked, and what the cadets had learned was a thoughtful expression. She changed more than shield technology that day. She changed how 2 species saw each other. Not bad for an engineer who claimed her greatest achievement was modifying a coffee maker to work in zero gravity. Valkthor waved one of his lower hands, catching the bartender's attention. "But you want to know about their most powerful weapon?" It wasn't their ships, their endurance, or even their adaptability. It was their minds. Their minds. The youngest cadet wrinkled his snout in confusion. "But human brains are demonstrably smaller than ours." "Size isn't everything," Valkthor chuckled. "Remember the Battle of Proxima Gate? We had them outgunned, outmanned, and surrounded. Standard tactical analysis gave them a 0% chance of survival. Then they started broadcasting something across all frequencies." Nixara's scales shifted color with recognition. "The chicken dance incident?" "The very same, though calling it an incident barely scratches the surface. Valkthor shook his head. There we were, the pride of the Zentari fleet, ready to deliver the killing blow, when suddenly this ridiculous music starts playing, and the humans, they began dancing, in the middle of a battle. Our psychologists spent weeks analyzing it, convinced it was some form of mass hysteria brought on by battle stress. Turns out it was completely planned. They knew our species instinctively tries to find patterns in enemy behavior. The sight of an entire crew performing synchronized movements while facing certain death? It broke our tactical algorithms. While our ship's computers were trying to predict their next move based on dance patterns, they rewrote their shield frequencies to match the rhythm of the music. Our weapons couldn't get a lock because they were literally dancing between our shots. The commander gestured expansively with his upper arms. But here's the truly devious part. They knew the footage would spread through our fleet. Soon, every Zentari warrior had seen humans treating a battle like a party. It changed how we saw them. How do you maintain proper military discipline when your enemy might start a dance party in the middle of a firefight? The humans called it psychological warfare. We called it madness. Both sides were right. He paused to sip his drink. After that, they started getting creative. They'd name their ships things like USS, definitely not a trap, or HMS. Please ignore this vessel. Do you know how confusing that is for automated targeting systems? One of the cadets raised a hand. But Commander, surely after the first few times we adapted to their strategies? That's just it. There was no strategy to adapt to. The moment we thought we understood their psychological tactics, they'd do something completely different. During the siege of Tau Ceti, they reprogrammed our warning klaxons to play something called disco music. In the Battle of New Mars, they hacked our communication systems to replace all official transmissions with quotes from something called dad jokes. Our warriors would go into battle prepared for anything, only to find humans naming their combat drones things like Kevin or Bob. Try maintaining battle focus when you're being attacked by a drone that introduces itself as Susan and apologizes for the inconvenience while shooting at you. Valkthor's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of amused frustration. They even turned our own cultural misunderstandings into weapons. Remember how our species considers it a sign of aggression to show teeth while speaking? Humans do it constantly. They call it smiling. During diplomatic negotiations, they deliberately smile at our most serious warriors, knowing it would make them uncomfortable. But the laughter... His voice took on an almost reverent tone. That was their masterpiece. Humans laugh for so many reasons: joy, fear, anger, confusion. In battle, they laugh the loudest. Do you know what it does to morale when you're fighting an enemy that seems to be enjoying themselves? Nyxara's antenna twitched thoughtfully. Is that why the new combat training includes exposure to human entertainment? Exactly. We had to adapt, not just to their tactics, but to their way of thinking. They turned warfare into a form of improvised theater. Every battle became a story they were telling, complete with running commentary and inside jokes. During the final battle of the war, a human commander actually ordered her troops to, and I quote, "Remember, everyone has a role to play, so make it fun and keep the audience entertained." The audience was us. They were treating the entire conflict like some form of interactive performance art. He gestured to his battle scars. Got these during that battle. The human medic who treated me asked if I wanted them to look more dramatic for better storytelling value. Then she offered to draw happy faces on my bandages because, apparently, that helps with healing. I still don't know if she was joking. That's their true power. They keep you constantly off balance. In a universe of predictable patterns and logical responses, humans are gloriously, terrifyingly random. They turn battles into games, wars into stories, and enemies into friends, all while humming tunes and making references we don't understand. Valkthor straightened his armor. So when you face humans in combat simulations, remember this. There is no winning strategy. There is no perfect counter. The moment you think you understand humans is the moment they'll surprise you with something new, and they'll probably be laughing while they do it. The bar had grown quiet. The other patrons long since abandoned any pretense of not listening to Valkthor's stories. The commander looked at his audience, noting how their scales had shifted through various colors of emotion throughout his tales. the peace treaty signing? He smiled, showing his ceremonial fangs. Now that was a truly unique demonstration of human nature. They insisted on holding it on their space station. We expected a formal, solemn affair. Instead, they called it a peace party and combined it with something called a barbecue. "But Commander," one of the cadets protested, "our historical records show it was a dignified diplomatic event." "Oh, the official records," Valkthor laughed. "They don't mention how Captain Drake convinced our high command to try something called hot sauce, or how Sergeant Rodriguez taught our honor guard to play beach volleyball in low gravity. And they certainly don't mention how Lieutenant Chen's engineering team had rigged the station's artificial gravity to create a dance floor." He gestured to the bar around them. "Places like this, they're based on human gathering spots. They taught us that warriors need places to relax, to share stories, to laugh. Before humans, our recreation facilities were just combat simulation rooms." The treaty itself was 40 pages long. The first 39 were standard diplomatic language. But that last page, it simply said, "Humans and Zentari agree to be awesome to each other and party on, dudes." Our diplomats were horrified. The humans insisted it was the most important page. Nick Zara's antenna twitched. "Was it?" Looking back, yes, because it captured something essential about humans. They take serious things lightly and light things seriously. That page reminded us that peace isn't just about rules and regulations. It's about understanding each other. Valkthor's 4 eyes focused on his empty glass. "You know what really sealed the peace? Not the treaty. It was what happened after. Humans started inviting our warriors to their homes for something called movie nights. They shared their stories, their jokes, their music. They taught us to see warfare differently. We learned that humans don't just fight with weapons or tactics. They fight with heart, with humor, with an unshakable spirit that turns battlefields into stages and enemies into future friends. They taught us that sometimes the best way to win is to stop fighting and share a meal instead. But make no mistake," his voice grew serious, "this respect we've developed doesn't mean humans aren't dangerous. If anything, they're more dangerous now that we understand them better. Because we know that beneath their smiles and jokes lies an indomitable will. Their friendship is a gift, but their enmity? That's a force of nature." The commander stood, his armor gleaming in the bar's soft light. "So let me give you young warriors some advice. If you ever face humans in battle, remember these things. They are never as weak as they appear. Their chaos has purpose. Their laughter is both a shield and a weapon. And most importantly, they make better friends than enemies. If you hear human laughter during a battle, you have 2 choices. You can run, or you can join in. Running rarely works. They love a good chase. But if you join in, you might just find yourself part of one of their stories." "And one last thing," Valkthor's mandibles clicked in amusement. "If a human ever offers you something called a high five after a battle, accept it. It took us 3 years to realize it wasn't a combat challenge but a gesture of friendship. Cost us a lot of awkward diplomatic incidents before we figured that out." He looked at each of the young cadets in turn. "You're the first generation being trained alongside humans from the start. Use that opportunity. Learn from them. Not just their tactics or their technology, but their spirit. Because in the end, that's what makes them truly formidable. Not their weapons or their endurance, but their ability to find joy in the chaos of combat and friendship in the aftermath of war." Now, he straightened his medals one final time. "I believe it's time for me to head to the human sector of the station. Captain Drake is hosting something called a karaoke night, and I've been practicing a song called Sweet Caroline. Apparently everyone has to sing the bum 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 part, though I'm still not entirely sure why." The cadets watched in amazed silence as their legendary commander headed for the door, humming a distinctly human tune. Just before leaving, he turned back with a final piece of advice. "Remember, young warriors, in a universe full of advanced species and powerful weapons, humanity's greatest achievement wasn't surviving us. It was teaching us how to survive ourselves. And they did it all while making us laugh."
Like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. Your support means the world to me and helps me keep creating amazing content for you.